Marcus Chen wiped the grease from his hands with a worn cloth, stepping back to admire the sleek fighter craft suspended in the maintenance bay. The Terran Defense Force's newest interceptor gleamed under the hangar's harsh lights, its angular hull reflecting his satisfied grin. After 6 hours of delicate work on the plasma conduits, the bird was finally ready to fly again. The Kepler station buzzed with activity around him. Mechanics shouted instructions across the massive hangar while hover lifts carried spare parts between the dozens of spacecraft in various states of repair. The station served as humanity's primary military outpost in the Rigel sector, a jumping-off point for patrols along the contested border with the hegemony. Marcus loved the chaos of it all. The smell of lubricants and burning metal, the constant hum of fusion reactors, the satisfying weight of tools in his hands. He'd been the station's chief engineer for 3 years now, ever since the previous occupant had been promoted to a cushy desk job back on Earth. Unlike his predecessor, Marcus preferred getting his hands dirty to pushing data pads around. His personal communicator chimed, displaying a message from Lieutenant Torres in flight control. Another routine inspection request for Bay 7. Marcus sighed and tapped out a quick reply, then hesitated as he noticed the time, 1,847 hours. Commander Zixaria would be making her evening rounds soon. The thought of his commanding officer brought a mixture of frustration and fascination. Commander Zixaria Ketvaner of the Altarian Republic had been assigned to Kepler Station 8 months ago as part of the military exchange program between humanity and their newest allies. She was brilliant, efficient, and absolutely impossible to read. The Altarians resembled humans in basic structure but stood nearly 7 feet tall, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Their features were sharp and elegant, almost ethereal, and their large violet eyes held an intelligence that could be unsettling. Zixaria embodied all these traits perfectly, carrying herself with the poise of someone born to command. She was also the most aloof person Marcus had ever met. During their daily briefings, she spoke only when necessary, delivering reports in crisp, precise sentences that revealed nothing of her thoughts or feelings. She never smiled, never joked, never showed any sign that she was anything more than a perfectly programmed military android. Marcus had tried everything to crack that icy exterior. He'd shared funny stories, offered local delicacies, even attempted to teach her human card games during off-duty hours. Nothing worked. She remained as distant as the stars outside the station's viewports. The other officers had given up trying to connect with her months ago, content to treat their interactions as purely professional. But something about Zixaria intrigued Marcus beyond mere curiosity. He caught glimpses, sometimes a brief flicker of emotion when she thought no one was looking, a slight pause before delivering particularly harsh criticism, the way her fingers drummed against her thigh when she was deep in thought. There was a person beneath that cool facade. He was sure of it. Marcus finished his inspection report and was preparing to head to the mess hall when his communicator buzzed again. This time it wasn't a routine message. The display showed Commander Zixaria's personal frequency, marked with the red priority flag reserved for emergencies. He frowned and opened the message, expecting to find orders for some critical repair or a last-minute mission briefing. Instead, he found a single line of text that made his eyebrows shoot toward his hairline. "Report to my office immediately. We need to discuss your performance." Marcus stared at the words, his stomach dropping. His performance? He'd never received anything but commendations for his work. His maintenance schedules were always ahead of target. His teams operated with military precision, and he'd personally overseen modifications that had increased engine efficiency by 12% across the fleet. What could possibly be wrong? He made his way through the station's corridors, nodding to passing personnel while his mind raced through recent events. Had he missed something critical? Made an error that compromised mission readiness? The thought of disappointing his crew or worse, endangering lives made his chest tight with anxiety. The command section occupied the station's upper levels, its polished floors and pristine walls a stark contrast to the functional grime of the maintenance bays. Marcus had always felt slightly out of place here, like a mechanic who'd wandered into a museum by mistake. He paused outside Commander Zixaria's office, straightening his uniform and running a hand through his dark hair. The door was standard military issue, offering no clue about what waited beyond. He pressed the activation panel and heard her voice, cool and measured as always. "Enter." The office was Spartan even by military standards. A simple desk, 2 chairs, and a wall display showing tactical readouts from the sector patrol routes. Commander Zyxaria sat behind the desk, her attention focused on a datapad. She didn't look up as he approached. "Commander Chen reporting as ordered, sir." She finished reading whatever held her attention and finally raised those violet eyes to meet his. As always, her expression revealed nothing. She might have been analyzing the quarterly fuel consumption reports for all the emotion she showed. "Sit down, Marcus." The use of his first name caught him off guard. She'd never done that before, always maintaining strict military protocol in their interactions. He settled into the chair across from her desk, acutely aware of the way she studied his face. "Your performance reviews have been exemplary," she began, her voice betraying nothing. "Your teams respect you. Your work consistently exceeds expectations, and you've implemented several innovations that have improved fleet readiness." Marcus felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. "Thank you, sir. I try to. However," she continued, cutting him off, "there is one area where your conduct has been problematic." The tension returned full force. "Sir?" Zyxaria set down her datapad and folded her hands on the desk. When she spoke, her tone remained perfectly neutral, but Marcus could swear he detected something lurking beneath the surface. Amusement? Irritation? He couldn't tell. "You seem to labor under the impression that military discipline is optional when dealing with superior officers." Marcus blinked. "I don't understand, sir. Your attempts at humor during briefings, your casual disregard for proper formality, the way you—" She paused, and for just a moment, her composure seemed to crack. "The way you look at me." Heat flooded Marcus's cheeks. He'd thought he'd been subtle, but apparently his fascination with his enigmatic commanding officer had been more obvious than he'd realized. "Sir, I apologize if I've been inappropriate. It was never my intention to—" "I'm not finished." The sharp command silenced him immediately. Zyxaria leaned back in her chair, those violet eyes never leaving his face. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost thoughtful. "Among my people, such behavior would be considered either grossly insubordinate or—" She trailed off, as if reconsidering her words. "Or what, sir?" For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, she said, "Or courtship." The word hung in the air between them like an unexploded ordnance. Marcus felt his world shift slightly off its axis. Courtship? Had he been inadvertently sending romantic signals to his alien commanding officer for the past 8 months? The thought was mortifying and confusing, and, if he was being honest with himself, not entirely unpleasant. "Sir, I never meant to imply, didn't you?" She tilted her head, studying him with new intensity. "Tell me, Marcus, in human culture, how does one typically express romantic interest?" The question was so unexpected, so unlike anything he'd ever heard from her, that he found himself answering without thinking. "Well, it depends. Some people are direct, others prefer subtle signals, shared jokes, casual touches, finding excuses to spend time together." He trailed off as he realized what he'd just described. Every interaction he'd had with her for months, viewed through this new lens, suddenly took on a different meaning. The extra time he'd spent perfecting reports he knew she'd read, the way he'd volunteered for duties that would bring him into contact with her, the jokes that had fallen flat because she'd been interpreting them as something else entirely. "I see," she said, and Marcus could swear he heard satisfaction in her voice. "So your behavior has been intentional?" "No. I mean, not the way you're thinking. I just—" He stumbled over the words, trying to find some way to explain without making things worse. "I wanted to get to know you. As a person, not just as a commanding officer. You're so distant, professional. I thought maybe if I could make you laugh, or show you that humans aren't all work and regulations. You thought you could what, exactly, charm me into friendship?" The way she said it made him feel like an idiot. "Something like that, yes, sir." Another long silence. Then, to his complete amazement, Commander Zyxaria did something he'd never seen before. She smiled. It was a small thing, barely a curl at the corners of her mouth, but it transformed her entire face. The cold perfection of her features warmed, revealing hints of humor and intelligence that had been hidden beneath her military mask. For the first time since meeting her, Marcus glimpsed the person behind the rank. "You humans," she said, and there was definite amusement in her voice now. "So direct in some ways, so impossibly subtle in others. Do you have any idea how confusing your signals have been?" "My signals?" 8 months, Marcus. 8 months of wondering whether you were the most insubordinate soldier I'd ever encountered or... She shook her head, that small smile still playing at her lips. My people are not known for uncertainty. We prefer clear communication, explicit intentions. Your behavior has been challenging to interpret. Marcus felt like he was navigating a minefield blindfolded. I'm sorry if I caused confusion, sir. I never intended. Stop apologizing. She stood and moved around the desk, perching on its edge directly in front of him. The casual pose was so unlike her usual rigid posture that he barely recognized her. I want to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Of course, sir. If we weren't bound by military protocol and the complications of interspecies relations, would you be interested in pursuing this courtship properly? The question hit him like a plasma bolt to the chest. Marcus stared up at her, taking in the way the light caught the blue shimmer of her skin, the intelligence dancing in those violet eyes, the graceful strength of her tall frame. He thought about 8 months of stolen glances and failed attempts at connection. He thought about the loneliness he'd glimpsed beneath her professional exterior. He thought about how much trouble they'd both be in if anyone overheard this conversation. Yes, he said simply. I would. The smile returned, wider this time. Good. Because I've been wondering the same thing. Before Marcus could process what was happening, his communicator chimed with an incoming message. He glanced at the display and saw it was marked urgent, from Central Command. Zix Arya noticed his expression and immediately shifted back into command mode. What is it? Message from Command. Priority Alpha. He frowned at the text scrolling across the small screen. There's been an incident at the Helios mining station. Hegemony forces have blockaded the system and are demanding the release of some prisoners we don't have. Zix Arya was already moving, pulling up tactical displays on her wall screen. Time frame? Diplomatic deadline is in 18 hours. If we don't comply, they're threatening to destroy the station. Casualties? 230 civilian miners, plus the station garrison. The Hegemony claims this is retaliation for a terrorist attack on one of their supply convoys. She studied the star charts, her expression grim. The nearest fleet elements are 40 hours away. Even if we dispatch them immediately, they wouldn't arrive in time. Marcus stood and joined her at the display, his engineer's mind already working through the problem. What about a small force? Something fast enough to reach the system before the deadline? With what ships? The patrol squadrons are fast but lightly armed. Against a Hegemony blockade force, they'd be slaughtered. Not necessarily. Marcus pointed to one of the tactical markers. The Kepler prototype is ready for field trials. She's fast enough to make the run, and her stealth systems are better than anything in the fleet. One ship against a blockade? That's not a rescue mission. It's suicide. Not if we're smart about it. Marcus felt the familiar rush of a technical challenge taking shape in his mind. The Kepler wasn't designed for direct combat. She was built for infiltration and intelligence gathering. If we can get close enough to the station without being detected. He trailed off as he realized what he was suggesting. A stealth mission deep into enemy territory, with hundreds of lives hanging in the balance and only one chance to get it right. It was exactly the kind of impossible task that humans specialized in. Zix Arya must have reached the same conclusion because she turned to him with something that might have been respect. You're proposing to sneak past an entire Hegemony fleet and somehow evacuate a mining station without anyone noticing? I'm proposing we give it a try, because the alternative is watching 230 innocent people die. She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well. But I'll be piloting the mission personally. Sir, with respect, you're needed here to coordinate the overall response. Besides, I know that ship better than anyone. I've been working on her systems for months. This is not a maintenance exercise, Marcus. This is a combat mission in hostile territory, which is why you need someone who understands every bolt, wire, and circuit in that ship. Someone who can fix problems on the fly and push her performance beyond design specifications. He met her eyes steadily. You need an engineer who's crazy enough to try something this impossible. For a moment, he thought she would refuse. Then that small smile returned, and Marcus knew he'd won. Very well, Chief Chen. It appears you're about to get your chance to impress me properly. As they began planning the mission that would either save 200 lives or get them both killed, Marcus reflected on how dramatically his evening had changed. An hour ago, his biggest worry had been whether the plasma conduits in Bay 7 were properly aligned. Now he was preparing for what might be the most dangerous mission of his career, with an alien commander who'd just admitted to harboring romantic feelings toward him. He couldn't help but grin as he pulled up the technical specifications for the stealth ship. If they survived the next 20 hours, it was going to be one hell of a story to tell their grandchildren, assuming, of course, that interspecies relationships could produce grandchildren. That was a question for another day. For now, he had a rescue mission to plan and a ship to prepare. And maybe, if he was very lucky and very skilled, he'd get the chance to show Commander Zeke Zarya exactly what humans were capable of when the stakes were high and the odds were impossible. After all, that's what the HFY motto was all about. When the galaxy needed someone crazy enough to attempt the impossible, call a human. The Kepler prototype rested in the station's most secure hangar, her black hull drinking in the overhead lights like hungry space. Marcus ran his hands along her sleek flanks, feeling the subtle vibrations of her idling systems. She was beautiful in the way that only perfectly functional machinery could be, every line and curve optimized for a single purpose. Sensor array modifications complete, reported Lieutenant Kim, one of Marcus's best technicians. The passive scanners are now calibrated for hegemony energy signatures. You'll be able to detect their ships long before they notice you. Marcus nodded, checking the readings on his portable diagnostic unit. The past 6 hours had been a blur of frantic preparation. While Zeke Zarya handled the diplomatic channels and coordinated with Central Command, he'd supervised a complete overhaul of the ship's systems. The Kepler had been designed as a reconnaissance vessel, built to slip undetected through enemy space and gather intelligence. Her stealth capabilities were revolutionary, a combination of adaptive hull plating that could mimic the background radiation of space and a revolutionary dampening field that masked her energy signatures. But she'd never been tested under real combat conditions. Cargo bay modifications? Marcus asked Kim. Finished an hour ago. We've stripped out everything non-essential and installed emergency life support pods. Capacity is now 250 people. Assuming they don't mind being packed like sardines. Marcus winced. The evacuation would be uncomfortable at best, potentially dangerous if the mission ran longer than expected. Emergency life support wasn't designed for extended journeys. Engine upgrades? That's where it gets interesting. Kim grinned, pulling up a holographic display of the drive systems. I followed your specifications and increased the plasma flow rate by 30%. The engines can now push her to speeds that would make a racing pilot jealous. How long can we maintain that kind of output? That's the million-credit question. Computer models suggest 8 hours before we risk cascade failure. Could be longer, could be shorter. We won't know until you light her up. Marcus studied the modifications, mentally running through potential failure scenarios. 8 hours should be enough to reach the Helios system, conduct the rescue, and get clear of hegemony space. Should be. Chief Chen, report to the bridge. Zeke Zarya's voice over the comm system interrupted his technical review. Marcus handed his diagnostic unit to Kim and made his way to the ship's compact command center. The Kepler's bridge was designed for a crew of 4, with stations for pilot, co-pilot, navigator, and systems officer. For this mission, they'd be operating with just the 2 of them. Zeke Zarya stood before the main display screen, studying intelligence reports from the Helios system. She'd traded her dress uniform for practical flight gear, and Marcus was struck again by how the casual clothing revealed hints of the person beneath the military facade. Status report, she said without turning around. All systems green. Engine modifications are complete, and the cargo bay is ready for passengers. We can launch as soon as you give the word. Good. Because our timeline just got compressed. She gestured to the tactical display. Long-range sensors have detected movement in the hegemony fleet. 3 additional cruisers just arrived in the system. Marcus felt his stomach clench. How many ships are we looking at now? 12 confirmed contacts, including 2 heavy destroyers. They've arranged themselves in a perfect blockade formation around the mining station. Getting through that cordon without being detected will be. She paused, as if searching for the right word. Challenging, but possible. With your ship modifications and a considerable amount of luck. Yes. The question is what happens after we collect the miners. Even with our stealth systems, launching 250 people from the station will create enough energy signature to alert every sensor in the system. Marcus nodded grimly. He'd been thinking about the same problem. The rescue itself was only half the mission. Getting everyone out alive would require a completely different approach. I have an idea about that, he said. But you're not going to like it. Zixaria turned to face him, one elegant eyebrow raised. I'm listening. We don't try to sneak out. Instead, we create enough chaos and confusion to mask our escape. Elaborate. Marcus called up a schematic of the mining station on the main display. The Helios facility processes raw ore using thermal extraction systems. Basically, they heat mineral deposits to several thousand degrees and separate the valuable metals from the waste rock. I'm familiar with standard mining operations. Right. But here's the interesting part. Those extraction systems are basically giant bombs waiting for the right trigger. If someone were to overload the thermal regulators and destabilize the containment fields, understanding dawned in her violet eyes. You want to blow up the mining station, not blow up. Create a controlled explosion that looks accidental but produces enough electromagnetic interference to blind every sensor in the system for about 10 minutes, long enough for us to jump to hyperspace and disappear. Zixaria studied the schematic, her expression thoughtful. The explosion would have to be carefully timed. Too early, and the hegemony fleet will have time to reposition. Too late, and we'll be caught in the blast ourselves, which is why I'll need to stay behind and trigger it manually. The words left his mouth before he'd fully thought them through. But as soon as he said them, Marcus knew it was the only way. The thermal extraction systems were too complex to be sabotaged remotely, especially with the limited time they'd have on the station. Absolutely not. Zixaria's response was immediate and sharp. I will not leave a crew member behind. It's the only way to ensure the timing is perfect. Besides, someone needs to guide the evacuees to the ship and make sure they're all accounted for. That someone should be you. I said no, Marcus, we find another way. The use of his first name, combined with the steel in her voice, told him this wasn't a tactical discussion anymore. It was personal. The realization sent a warm flutter through his chest, even as he recognized the danger of letting emotions influence their mission planning. Zeeks, he said quietly, using her personal name for the first time. 250 people are depending on us. If there was any other way, you know I'd take it. She stared at him for a long moment, and he could see the conflict playing out behind her eyes. The military commander, who valued every life under her protection, the woman who'd just admitted to having feelings for him, the alien trying to understand human motivations and sacrifice. Finally, she nodded. Very well, but we explore every alternative first. If there's any other way to accomplish the mission objectives, we take it. Agreed. They spent the next hour refining their approach, studying sensor reports from the Helios system, and identifying the optimal route through the hegemony blockade. The enemy ships had positioned themselves with military precision, creating overlapping sensor nets that would detect any conventional approach. But the Kepler wasn't a conventional ship. Computer analysis suggests this vector offers our best chance of remaining undetected, Zixaria said, highlighting a course that would take them through the outer edge of the system's asteroid field. The background radiation from the mining operations should help mask our approach. Marcus nodded, though something about the plan nagged at him. What about patrol routes? The hegemony isn't going to just sit there and wait for the deadline. They'll have scouts moving through the system. Intelligence suggests random patrol patterns every 4 to 6 hours. If we time our approach correctly, we should be able to slip through during a gap in their coverage. Should be. Could. Might. Marcus was getting tired of building a mission plan on uncertainties. But then again, that was what humans did best, take calculated risks when the alternatives were unacceptable. All right, he said. Let's do this. The launch sequence was routine, a comforting reminder that some things remained constant, even when the stakes were life and death. Marcus settled into the pilot's seat, running through the pre-flight checklist with mechanical precision. Beside him, Zixaria monitored communications and sensor readings, her fingers dancing across control interfaces with practiced ease. Kepler Control, this is Prototype 1 requesting departure clearance. Prototype 1, you are cleared for immediate launch. Good hunting. The hangar bay doors opened like a mechanical mouth, revealing the star field beyond. Marcus engaged the engines and felt the familiar push of acceleration as they slipped away from the station. Within minutes, Kepler Station was just another point of light behind them. Jump coordinates laid in, Zixaria reported. Hyperspace transit in 3, 2, 1. Reality twisted around them as the ship entered hyperspace. folding the distance between star systems into a manageable journey. The main display showed their estimated arrival time 6 hours and 14 minutes, plenty of time to reach the Helios system before the hegemony deadline, but barely enough to plan for the dozens of things that could go wrong. Marcus activated the autopilot and leaned back in his chair, finally allowing himself to feel the weight of what they were attempting. In 6 hours, they'd be sneaking past one of the most advanced military fleets in the galaxy, conducting an evacuation under impossible conditions, and betting their lives on an untested sabotage plan. It was insane. It was also exactly the kind of challenge that reminded him why he loved being human. "You're thinking very loudly," Zixaria observed from the co-pilot's seat. "Care to share?" Marcus glanced at her, taking in the way her features looked softer in the subdued bridge lighting. "Just wondering what my mother would think if she knew her son was about to attempt the most dangerous rescue mission in human history. What would she think? Probably that I should have listened when she told me to become an accountant instead of an engineer." He smiled at the memory. "My family never understood my fascination with machines and impossible problems. They preferred safe, predictable careers. And yet you chose this life anyway. Someone has to be willing to take risks, to push boundaries and attempt the impossible. If everyone played it safe, we'd still be stuck on Earth wondering what was out there among the stars." Zixaria was quiet for a moment, her violet eyes thoughtful. "Among my people, such attitudes are considered problematic. We value order, precision, careful planning. The idea of attempting something with uncertain outcomes is deeply uncomfortable for most Altarians." "Then why did you volunteer for this mission?" "Because," she said slowly, "I've learned that sometimes the most important victories come from embracing uncertainty, from trusting in intuition and skill, when logic suggests failure." "Sounds very human of you." "Perhaps. Or perhaps humans have taught me that there are different forms of wisdom." She met his eyes, and Marcus felt that flutter of warmth again. 8 months ago, I thought your species was reckless to the point of self-destruction. Now I'm beginning to understand that what I saw as recklessness might actually be a form of courage." Before Marcus could respond, the ship's proximity alarm chimed softly. They were still hours away from the Helios system, but something had triggered the passive sensors. "Contact bearing 270 Mark 15, Zixaria reported, her attention focused on the sensor displays. Single ship, running silent. Marcus felt his blood chill. Hegemony? Unknown. The signature is too faint to identify, but... She paused, adjusting the sensor gain. "Wait. I'm reading Terran transponder codes." Relief flooded through him, quickly followed by confusion. "What's a Terran ship doing out here?" "Hailing us now," Zixaria said, her finger hovering over the communication controls. Should I respond? Marcus thought quickly. Any ship in this region of space was either heading to or from the Helios system. If it was a Terran vessel, they might have intelligence about the situation. On the other hand, their mission was classified at the highest levels. Contact with anyone could compromise their stealth approach. Put them through, he decided. But keep it brief. The main display flickered to life, revealing the face of a middle-aged woman in a Terran Defense Force uniform. Her expression was grim, and Marcus could see the telltale signs of stress and exhaustion around her eyes. "This is Captain Morrison of the cargo vessel Intrepid. Please identify yourselves." "Kepler Prototype 1, Marcus replied carefully. "We're on a classified mission to the Helios system." Morrison's expression grew even more troubled. "Then you need to know the situation there is worse than Command realizes. The hegemony isn't just blockading the system. They're conducting active scans of every ship that approaches. 3 vessels have been destroyed in the past 12 hours for suspicious behavior." Marcus felt his carefully planned mission start to unravel. What kind of scans? Deep spectrum analysis. They're not just looking for weapons or illegal cargo. They're mapping the internal structure of every ship, checking crew manifests against passenger lists, verifying cargo against shipping records. Your stealth systems won't matter if they can see right through your hull. The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of environmental systems. Marcus stared at the tactical display, his mind racing through the implications. If the hegemony was conducting deep scans of approaching vessels, their carefully planned stealth approach was doomed from the start. But 250 people were still trapped on that mining station, and the deadline was still ticking down. "Thank you for the warning, Captain," he said finally. "We'll take it under advisement." Morrison's expression suggested she knew exactly what that meant. "Good luck, Prototype 1. Those miners are counting on someone being crazy enough to try. The communication channel closed, leaving them alone with the enormity of what they were attempting. Marcus looked at Zixaria, seeing his own determination reflected in her violet eyes. "Well," he said with forced lightness, "I guess we'll just have to be more creative than originally planned." Define creative. Marcus pulled up the ship's technical specifications, his engineer's mind already working through the problem. "If they're going to scan us anyway, why don't we give them exactly what they expect to see?" "I'm listening." "The Intrepid is a cargo vessel. Standard configuration, routine shipping manifest, nothing suspicious about her at all. But what if the Kepler could look exactly like the Intrepid?" Understanding dawned in her eyes. "You want to create a false sensor image. More than that, I want to completely replicate another ship's signature. Engine emissions, hull composition, internal structure, everything." The Kepler's adaptive systems were designed for passive stealth, but with some modifications, we might be able to fool their deep scans. "That's ambitious. Do we even have the technical capability?" Marcus was already pulling up diagnostic routines, his fingers flying across the control interfaces. Only one way to find out. "And Zeeks, this is definitely going to void the warranty." As they dropped out of hyperspace and began their approach to the most heavily defended system in hegemony space, Marcus couldn't help but grin. Whatever happened next, it was going to be one hell of a ride. The Helio system materialized around them like a three-dimensional chessboard of death. Marcus felt his breath catch as the sensor displays populated with hostile contacts. 12 hegemony warships arranged in perfect formation around the mining station, their energy signatures blazing like miniature suns against the cold backdrop of space. "Mother of stars," Zixaria whispered, her usual composure cracking slightly. Intelligence reports underestimated their numbers. Marcus counted the contacts again, hoping he'd made an error. He hadn't. 2 heavy destroyers, 4 cruisers, and 6 escort frigates. Enough firepower to reduce a planet to molten slag, all focused on preventing exactly what they were attempting to do. "Sensor masking in 30 seconds, he announced, his fingers dancing across the engineering controls. The past 2 hours had been a frantic race to modify the Kepler's adaptive systems, pushing them far beyond their intended parameters. Theoretical possibilities had become desperate necessities. "Are you certain this will work?" Zixaria asked, monitoring the incoming scan patterns from the hegemony fleet. "Honestly, no. But the alternative is turning around and explaining to command why we let 250 people die." Marcus initiated the masking sequence, watching as the ship's systems began their elaborate deception. Besides, when has certainty ever stopped humans from trying the impossible? The Kepler's hull began to shimmer as adaptive plating shifted its molecular composition, mimicking the metallurgical signature of a standard cargo vessel. Energy dampeners modified their engine emissions to match those of the Intrepid, while holographic projectors created false internal structures designed to fool deep-spectrum scans. To any observer, the sleek prototype vessel had become a mundane freight hauler carrying agricultural supplies to the outer colonies. "Incoming transmission," Zixaria reported. "Hegemony challenge frequency." Marcus straightened in his chair, forcing confidence into his voice. "Put them through." The main display flickered to life, revealing the angular features of a hegemony naval officer. The alien's skin had the gray-green coloration of his species, and his compound eyes glittered with predatory intelligence. "Attention, approaching vessel. You are entering a restricted military zone. State your business and prepare for immediate inspection." "This is Captain Marcus Chen of the cargo vessel Intrepid," Marcus replied, grateful that the hegemony officer couldn't see his racing pulse. "We're carrying emergency medical supplies for the mining station. Our manifest shows critical pharmaceuticals and emergency rations." The officer consulted a data display beyond the camera's range. "No supply runs are authorized at this time. The system is under military quarantine. Sir, these supplies are desperately needed. The mining accident damaged their medical facility, and without these pharmaceuticals, people will die." It was a calculated lie, but one that might resonate even with hegemony sensibilities. Marcus held his breath as the officer considered his words. "Transmit your complete manifest and prepare for deep spectrum analysis. Any attempt to deviate from approved flight paths will result in immediate destruction." "Understood. Transmitting manifest now." Zixaria's fingers flew across her controls, sending the carefully fabricated cargo records that Marcus's team had prepared. Meanwhile, Every sensor on their ship monitored the incoming scan beams, measuring energy patterns and frequency modulations. "They're initiating deep scan," she reported quietly. Internal structure mapping commencing. Marcus watched the engineering displays as their modified systems responded to the hegemony probe. Holographic projectors created false bulkheads and cargo bays, while adaptive plating mimicked the density and composition of medical supplies. To the scanning ship, the Kepler would appear to be exactly what its manifest claimed. Seconds stretched into eternities. Sweat beaded on Marcus's forehead despite the bridge's comfortable temperature. If their deception failed, they'd be vaporized long before they could explain their true mission. "Scan complete," the hegemony officer announced. "Your manifest matches your cargo configuration. You are cleared for approach Vector 77 Alpha. Do not deviate from the designated path." Relief flooded through Marcus, though he was careful not to let it show in his voice. "Acknowledged." Following Vector 77 Alpha, the transmission ended, leaving them alone with the magnitude of what they'd just accomplished. The most advanced military scanners in the galaxy had examined their ship at the molecular level and found exactly what they expected to see. "That was incredible," Zixaria said softly. "Your modifications completely fooled their analysis. Don't celebrate yet. The hard part is just beginning." Marcus adjusted their approach vector, bringing them closer to the mining station. "Once we dock, we'll have maybe an hour before someone notices that the medical supplies aren't being unloaded." The Helios mining station grew larger as they approached, its industrial bulk rotating slowly against the star field. Marcus could see the docking bays clearly now, along with the dozens of civilian craft that normally serviced the facility. All of them were dark and cold, their crews undoubtedly confined to quarters, while the hegemony maintained their blockade. "Docking Bay 7 is automated," Zixaria observed, studying the station schematics. "We can lock on and transfer aboard without interacting with station personnel." "Good. The fewer people who know we're here, the better." Marcus initiated the docking sequence, feeling the subtle vibration as magnetic grapples secured their ship to the station's hull. "From this point on, we're committed." They made their way to the ship's modified cargo bay, where emergency life support pods had been arranged in tight rows. Each pod could sustain 4 people for up to 6 hours, barely adequate for the journey back to Terran space, but enough to keep everyone alive if nothing went wrong. The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss, revealing a dimly lit maintenance corridor. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the walls, and the air carried the metallic taste of recycled atmosphere under stress. "This way," Zixaria said, consulting her handheld scanner. "The main habitation areas are 3 levels up." They moved through the station's corridors with practiced silence, passing automated systems that continued their functions despite the crisis. The miners had been confined to the central residential section, away from sensitive equipment and potential sabotage targets. As they approached the civilian quarters, Marcus could hear voices, frightened conversations, and the occasional crying of children. The sound strengthened his resolve. These people were counting on them, even if they didn't know it yet. The residential section's security doors had been sealed from the outside, but Marcus made quick work of the electronic locks with tools from his engineering kit. The doors slid open to reveal a crowded common area filled with miners and their families. The conversation stopped as everyone turned to stare at the newcomers. Marcus saw fear, hope, and confusion in their faces, people who'd given up expecting rescue and were struggling to accept that salvation might have arrived. "I'm Chief Engineer Marcus Chen, Terran Defense Force," he announced, his voice carrying clearly through the large space. "We're here to evacuate you to safety." A middle-aged man who seemed to be in charge stepped forward. "How is that possible? The hegemony has the entire system blockaded." "Let's just say we found a creative way through," Marcus replied. "But we don't have much time. I need everyone to gather their families and prepare for immediate departure. No personal belongings except essential medications." The station manager, Marcus guessed, shook his head. "There are 237 of us, including 46 children. Even if you have a ship large enough, the hegemony will detect any launch attempt." "Leave that to us," Zixaria said, stepping forward. Her commanding presence seemed to reassure the frightened civilians. "We have a plan to mask our departure, but it requires precise timing." As the miners began organizing themselves into family groups, Marcus pulled out his portable scanner and began mapping the station's critical systems. The thermal extraction facility was located 5 levels below, its massive fusion reactors providing power for the ore processing systems. "I need to plant the charges," he told Zixaria quietly. "It'll take about 20 minutes to reach the reactor level and set up the overload sequence. That's cutting it close. We need at least 15 minutes to get everyone aboard and secured." Marcus checked his chronometer. 37 minutes until the hegemony deadline. If everything went perfectly, they'd have maybe 2 minutes to spare. Then we'd better get moving. The evacuation proceeded with surprising efficiency. The miners had clearly rehearsed emergency procedures, forming orderly groups and following Zixaria's directions without question. Within 10 minutes, families were streaming through the station corridors toward the docking bay. Marcus took the opposite route, descending through service shafts and maintenance passages toward the station's industrial heart. The thermal extraction facility occupied 3 full levels, its massive equipment humming with barely controlled energy. He'd studied the technical specifications during the journey, but seeing the actual systems was overwhelming. Fusion reactors the size of buildings fed superheated plasma to ore processors that could melt solid rock in seconds. The safety margins were razor thin, designed to operate within specific parameters that Marcus was about to violate spectacularly. Working quickly, he accessed the primary control systems and began modifying the safety protocols. The explosion needed to be carefully timed large enough to create electromagnetic interference across the entire system, but not so large that it would destroy the evacuation ship. "Marcus, status report." Zixaria's voice crackled through his communicator. "Almost finished here. 2 more minutes. We have a problem. One of the hegemony escorts is moving toward the station. They're requesting updated status reports from the docking supervisor." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. If the hegemony ship detected the evacuation, their mission would become a massacre. How long until they're in scanning range? 6 minutes, maybe 7. He stared at the control systems, his mind racing through the calculations. The overload sequence would take 4 minutes to build to critical levels, add another minute to reach minimum safe distance, and they were looking at a 5-minute window from activation to escape. It would have to be enough. "Beginning overload sequence now," he announced, entering the final commands into the control system. Deep within the reactor cores, safety systems began shutting down while plasma temperatures climbed toward dangerous levels. Timer set for 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Acknowledged. All civilians are aboard and secured. We're ready for immediate departure. Marcus ran through the station corridors, taking the most direct route back to the docking bay. Behind him, warning klaxons began to sound as automated systems detected the rising energy levels in the extraction facility. He reached the airlock with 90 seconds to spare, diving through just as Zixaria initiated the undocking sequence. The Kepler detached from the station and began moving away at maximum stealth velocity. "Hegemony escort is hailing the station," Zixaria reported. No response from station control. Marcus strapped himself into the co-pilot's seat and began monitoring the reactor overload. The energy buildup was proceeding exactly as calculated, approaching the critical threshold that would trigger a cascading failure. 30 seconds, he announced. Through the bridge viewports, he could see the hegemony escort ship approaching the station. Its scanning beams probed the docking bays where their ship had been minutes earlier. 10 seconds. The entire mining station suddenly blazed with light as every thermal extraction reactor overloaded simultaneously. The explosion wasn't nuclear, the fusion reactions were carefully contained, but the electromagnetic pulse it generated was exactly what Marcus had calculated. Every sensor and communication system within 10 million kilometers was instantly blinded by static. The hegemony ships found themselves deaf and blind, their sophisticated electronics overwhelmed by the energy discharge. "Jump drive charging," Zixaria announced. "Hyperspace in 90 seconds. Marcus monitored their engine output, pushing the modified systems to their absolute limits. The Kepler's enhanced drives responded beautifully, accelerating them away from the station at velocities that should have been impossible for a ship her size. "Hegemony ships are beginning to recover," Zixaria warned. "I'm detecting movement in their formation." "Not fast enough," Marcus grinned, watching the jump drive reach full charge. 10 seconds to hyperspace. The star field twisted around them as they escaped into the alternate dimension of hyperspace, leaving the hegemony fleet far behind. In the cargo bay, 237 relieved civilians were beginning to realize they were actually safe. "Jump complete," Zixaria announced. "Course laid in for Kepler Station. Estimated arrival time: 6 hours, 14 minutes. Marcus leaned back in his chair, finally allowing himself to feel the magnitude of what they'd accomplished. They'd infiltrated the most heavily defended system in hegemony space, evacuated an entire mining station, and escaped without losing a single life. It was the kind of impossible victory that humans specialized in. The thermal extraction explosion was beautifully calculated, Zixaria observed. How did you know the exact energy output required? Educated guess based on theoretical models, Marcus admitted, plus a healthy dose of human intuition. Intuition. She repeated the word as if testing its flavor. Among my people, that concept is considered unreliable at best. Maybe that's why you needed humans to pull this off. Zixaria turned to face him, her violet eyes bright with something that might have been admiration. Perhaps, or perhaps I needed one human in particular. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that had nothing to do with military missions or interstellar politics. Marcus found himself studying her face, seeing past the alien features to the intelligence and warmth beneath. When we get back to Kepler Station, he said slowly, we're going to have to file mission reports. Explain how we accomplished something that should have been impossible. Yes, we will. There's going to be a lot of attention. Commendations, probably promotions, definitely reassignments. Most likely, things are going to change. Zixaria nodded, understanding the subtext of his words. Military protocols and interspecies regulations would make their developing relationship complicated, potentially impossible. Marcus, she said quietly, do you regret what we've discovered about each other? He thought about the question seriously, weighing duty against desire, regulation against emotion. Then he thought about the past 12 hours, the trust they'd built, the way they'd worked together as partners rather than superior and subordinate, the risks they'd taken for each other and for strangers they'd never met. No, he said finally, I don't regret anything. Her smile was radiant, transforming her entire face with warmth and joy. Good, because I've been thinking about what you said earlier about humans taking calculated risks when the alternatives are unacceptable. Oh? I've decided that some things are worth the risk of violating protocol. Some relationships are worth fighting for, even when the odds seem impossible. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. That sounds very human of you. I'm learning from an excellent teacher. As the Kepler continued its journey home, carrying the rescued miners toward safety and two unlikely partners toward an uncertain but promising future, Marcus reflected on the events that had brought them together. A playful message, a misunderstood gesture, a crisis that required the best of both their species to resolve. It was messy and complicated and absolutely perfect. After all, that's what made humans special. The willingness to embrace complexity, to find solutions in chaos, to risk everything for the chance at something extraordinary. And if he was very lucky, he'd just found someone who understood that particular kind of madness well enough to share it with him. In the cargo bay, the rescued families were sharing stories and planning their return to normal life. They'd never know how close they'd come to disaster, or how many seemingly impossible problems had been solved by two people learning to trust each other across the vast divide of species and culture. But Marcus knew, and as he watched Zixaria navigate their course home with the same precision and grace she brought to everything else, he decided that some impossible things were worth attempting after all, especially when you had the right partner to share the adventure with.